So good morning to you. Good morning, good morning. I'm Lesley. I'm one of the senior pastors here, and it is great to see you here this morning. It is 2013. 2000... No. That's a great start to the year. I've actually written 2013 down in my notes. That is highly embarrassing. The Lord can erase anything. The Lord's in the business of erasing. Right, let's start again. Hello, I'm Lesley. I'm one of the senior pastors here. I'm a highly competent woman. It's 2023. Woo! It's a new year. And did you know there is a very special birthday coming up this year? That's right. It is the 10-year anniversary of Croydon Vineyard, of this church. 10 years! And we have a party coming up in March, because we love to party, and we're going to celebrate being a church together in this place for the past 10 years. And we have grown from about 12 people to now over about 300 in the congregation. You may not realise it because some of them are upstairs in the kids groups and the youth group, but we have grown from about 12 people to over 300, and that is the Lord. The Lord's done that. We're united in Jesus Christ. Now, 2022, at least I got that one right, was a year of the kingdom of the now and the not yet. The kingdom of the now and the not yet. For some, 2022, the worst things ever happened to them. For some of us, the best things ever happened to us last year. And for some of us, both the best and the worst things happened to us last year. And we recognise the reality of that. And we recognise the painful reality of that. But Jesus is with us as a people. The Father never sleeps. And he's never sleeping during the hard times of life, and he's never sleeping during the easy times of life. He is in both. And until he returns, we have that tension of the hard times and the easy times. But as a community, we flourish together. Jesus has drawn us together, and because of him, we have flourished. We had a crossover event from marking 2022, 2023 of the new year. Hands up if you were there for the crossover event. Amazing, amazing. And we had some testimonies. We had an open mic time where people could share what the Lord had been doing in their life in this past year. And we had several testimonies that just showed how even in the hardest times of life, people in this church were showing the love of God by caring for each other very, very deeply. We had some stories of people in bereavement, being really low in mental health, and they were testifying to how the people of God in this church came to them and loved them and showed the love of God to them. Zara shared how when she was in intensive care a few months ago, she was cared for by her small group. Her small group had groups online with her while she was in intensive care, where they prayed and they looked after her and they visited. And it's because of Jesus. And what I loved about that story was it's not just the leaders of the church. In fact, Zara is a small group leader. She was the leader. It was her group. Because everybody gets to play. We all do that. Ministry of all believers. And that was demonstrated in some of those testimonies at the crossover night, which I just found so encouraging. We have seen 20% growth in Sunday service attendance. So this group you are part of, this gathering where we worship Jesus together, has grown 20% last year. And the Vineyard English School has moved to being 5 days a week. 5 days a week, members of this church teach English to those who are non-English speakers so that they can access things in the community and can access things in this country. And Andy's going to talk a bit more about that in a bit. And in terms of finances, we have flourished as a community. We actually thought we might lose 50k this year, but we broke even. In a time when there's a financial crisis. Because the people of God, the people of God, are generous. And you give in the hard times, and you give in the good times. Last year we moved to Harris Academy here. I couldn't believe it when we did a review of the year. Kind of this time last year we were just moving from the View Cinema. Which when we came out of COVID and lockdown, we couldn't find anywhere to meet. And so we met at the View Cinema in Valley Park, which was exciting for a while, but actually we couldn't get enough space for our young people and children. So we found here, and it's here that we've actually bedded down and we've flourished. And we also found the Harvest Centre. Hands up if you've been to the Harvest Centre for any of our events. Exactly, yeah. We didn't have that before. Ronnie and Pam, who played Blessing on us at the Christmas Eve service, opened up the Harvest Centre to us. We rent the offices. We've had worship times there, leadership times, healings. We have had bring and share lunches there, where those of us from all stages of life and all nationalities bring food and we eat together and we talk together, and Jesus is in the midst of it. We flourished, and it's all because of him. And we invested last year in some of our young leaders. Zach, who's very visible, you see him at the front, leading worship. He's going to be hating this right now. And Lara, who you can't see because most of what she does is not visible. She's out there with the young people. We invested in her this year. Now, if you notice, when the young people go out, as Tom said this morning, pretty much half the church clears. There's so many teenagers in this church coming to know Jesus and flourishing. We invested in these young leaders, and in 2022, we saw God use them phenomenally. And that's what we're about, raising sons and daughters. And it's Jesus who does that. So that's 2022. Why are you still talking about that, Lesley? What about 2023? What does God have on the radar for us? Because he doesn't slumber. He continues, and his kingdom continues to grow. Well, we have a specific phrase we think the Lord has given us for 2023, and actually probably for a bit longer than that as well, the next few years. Contending for spiritual awakening. We believe the Lord God in 2023 is asking us to contend with him for spiritual awakening. Let me hand over to Tom.
So it might be helpful to think, what is spiritual awakening? What does that mean? Fortunately, Jesus tells us in Matthew chapter 24, this is what Jesus says, therefore stay awake. Is it coming on the screen? Yeah, therefore stay awake, for you do not know what day your Lord is coming. But know this, if the master of the house had known in what part of the night the thief was coming, he would have stayed awake and would not have let his house be broken into. Therefore you also must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect. And then in chapter 25, he then goes and tells 3 parables to explain what he means by being awake, what it means by spiritual awakening. The first parable, and we will know these parables well, the first is of bridesmaids. There's 5, or virgins. There's 5 of them who have oil in their lamp and 5 who don't. And as the bridegroom is delayed in coming, when he eventually comes, those who have oil in his lamp can go and join the wedding party, and those who don't, can't. What's he telling us in this? Awakening, being awake, is having consistent expectation that God is going to show up. If you're spiritually awake, you're here right now and you're thinking, God's going to show up in this room, I think. God's going to show up. I expect God to continually and repeatedly show up, and I'm ready for that. The second parable is a parable of talents. There's 3 servants. We know this one. They're all given talents by God. 2 of them choose out of gratitude to invest the talents in the things that the master would want him to. And 1, with a silent sort of resentment towards the master, doesn't invest them. What's this Jesus showing us about what it is to be awake? Being spiritually awake is to have a deep sense of gratitude towards God that fuels your life. If you're spiritually awake, you just feel a gratitude to God. Oh, you've done so much for me. I'm so grateful to you. I just want to invest what you've given me in the things that are fruitful. The third parable is for the sheep and the goats. And the sheep see an overflow in their faith into showing simple mercy to people around them. They don't even realize they've done it. It's been so simple, they don't even realize. They've just shown mercy. The goats do not see an overflow in their faith into how they treat others. Their faith ultimately has benefited nobody other than themselves. And in the end, it doesn't even benefit themselves. Being awake to God sees an overflow of his mercy in us to the people around us. 3 things that Jesus says it is to be awake. We expect God to show up. Number 2, we live out a deep sense of gratitude. And number 3, an overflow of his mercy comes out of us. And Jesus says this: whether you are awake or asleep is the defining issue of your whole existence. The stakes could not be higher. This is what counts. Are you spiritually awake or are you asleep? And this is the real kind of moment in this. What he says is, most of you will think you're awake until the moment where you suddenly realize, oh my goodness, I'm actually asleep. So I used to ask people, hey, how are you doing with the Lord? And I've stopped asking that question because I've had so many people say, yeah, I'm doing well. And then you look at them and you think, but you're not. Because we are the greatest convincers of ourselves that we just don't understand ourselves. We don't know where we're at. And even if we do, we trick ourselves saying, yeah, I'm doing well with the Lord. Yeah, I'm doing well with the Lord. So now I ask people the question, what can I pray for you? Because if somebody says, can you just pray? And it's all about specific, you pray that I get a new job? Or can you pray, I've got this problem going. It's all about them. You think, you're asleep. You're spiritually asleep. So wake up. Because if your prayers are, I just want to see God show up more. I'm just so expectant for him. I'm so grateful for what he's done in my life. I'm so grateful. I just want more mercy to flow out of me into others. And you're like, you're awake. You're awake. Jesus tells us these parables because he wants to awaken us. He wants to. Jesus' entire ministry on this earth was to walk to people who thought they were deeply unworthy of being awake, who thought they could never wake themselves. I can't do this. This is too hard for me. And he says, yeah. I've come for you. I just come to awaken you. I've come to awaken you. And I don't know whether you've had this, but Jesus says, if you're poor in spirit, he's come to wake you up. He can deal with you because you'll be blessed. If you're meek, or if you're hungering for something, he can come to you. But if you think you can see, if you're, I've got this covered, I can do this in my own strength. It's like, well, you think you can see, but actually you're blind. You're actually blind. So the criteria for what it is to be spiritually awake is it all comes out of you saying to God, God, would you please do this, because I can't. And Jesus says, yep, that's exactly what I died for, that's what I rose again for, that's what I released the Spirit for, so let's do it. He wakes us. What this means is our first calling is a call to prayer. If we want to contend for spiritual awakening, we begin with prayer. Now, I don't know if this, just this illustration, I can't quite land it, but I think this is helpful. When our kids were really little, if you've got little kids, or you've had little kids, or you've got like nieces or nephews that you've ever looked after, or a little kid, you'll know they wake up quite early in the morning. And it can be a bit of an effort to go from being asleep to being awake. It can be quite an effort. And our youngest, at one point, he decided he wanted me to get up to be with him in the morning at some ungodly hour, like before I can even speak, let alone believe in the Lord or anything. And so what he did is he would come into the room. He did this once, only ever once. And as he came in, he grabbed the duvet, flung it back as fast as he sat down and went, "Dad, get up!" I actually thought I was getting attacked by terrorists. And I went, "Get away!" like shouting in his face. What? And he ran out the room. And then obviously Lesley had a little word with him, and she said, look, if you want to wake Daddy up in the morning, then just gently go to him and just blow on his face. So the next morning, I'm asleep, dreaming of the beauty of my wife, or something like that. I don't know. And there's this little blowing on my face. I think, oh, hark, what could this be? And I open my eyes, and there's my little son breathing, Daddy. This is what Jesus does to you. He says your name, and he breathes on you by his Spirit. Dan, here's the Spirit. Why don't you wake up? John, here's the Spirit. Why don't you wake up? You see, when we're praying, we're not trying to convince a God who doesn't want to do this to do it. That's what I used to think prayer was. If I could just, come on, like, if I can just convince you to do it. No. He wants to do this. This is everything he wants to do for you and for the people out there. So in prayer, what we're doing is somehow, in some mysterious way, we're just saying, okay, like this is what we're going to do. And he comes, and you just begin to see him, Zara, because I've prayed for Zara. I can't explain it. But this is what he does. Every move of God has always been birthed in prayer. I just can't get past the Azusa Street. I just love it. Like a group of poor, black, often disabled people just were so hungry for God in the south of America, where they were rejected and abused and mistreated. They weren't even allowed into the church meetings, so they stood in the corridor and listened through the window because they were hungry for the Lord. And they started to gather and just say, let's just pray and ask God to breathe on us by his Spirit. And they did it for about 30 or 40 days, and then all heaven broke loose. And the Azusa Street house where they met was so old and decrepit that it was falling down, and they had to stop meeting there because it just couldn't hold them. But what God did out of that room through simple people, and if you look at them, I look back and I read some of the things. William Seymour is a hero of mine. I read some of the things he wrote. Doc Trinley, he's all over the place. I mean, he's just wrong about a lot of doctrine. But it doesn't matter. Because the Lord just released an awakening through prayer. And the estimate is now that 800 million people have been awakened just out of that prayer. Across the world. 800 million right now. So it doesn't take a lot. It's not a huge extra job. It's not, you don't have to be sort of super spiritual. You just pray. And our vision for 2023 is we see people awaken through a significant growth in prayer across this church. As individually, we just find ourselves praying for people as we go about our day. We just begin to pray. Oh, I just pray for my manager. Oh, I just pray for my neighbor. Oh, I just pray for my family member. Oh, I just remember this person in my small group. Yeah, they've got it going. Let me just pray for them right now. That's what it is. Jesus' two things he says about prayer is it's simple and easy. Don't babble. Don't make it complicated. Don't think it has to be complex. And just keep doing it. Just do it simple. Keep doing it. Jackie Pullinger, a hero of ours and many in this church, she just would see people come off drugs just because people prayed. It's just pray. It's just simple. I mean, often they wouldn't know what to say, so they just would pray in tongues. But one of her main things was it's just simple. Just pray. Just pray. We want to begin to pray intentionally for a move of God in Croydon. And Vineyard churches nationally do prayer and fasting in January, so we're going to jump on the back of that. A week on Sunday, we're going to launch a week where we just say to you, would you fancy putting aside a day in these next 7 days, or more if you want. We've got some real prayer and fasting warriors, I know, but just one day we say, I'm going to miss a meal or I'm going to fast something on this day, just to pray for God to awaken people. We'll send out some info, but we'd love you to do that. Second, back to Lesley.
So the other way we believe the Lord wants us to contend for spiritual awakening is through acts of mercy and kindness. Our vision for 2023 is that we would see people awakened through us showing more simple mercy and kindness to others in the midst of our daily lives as an ordinary thing. Those who are spiritually awakened naturally show mercy and kindness to others. And we see this is something that the Lord wants to increase in us and through us in this coming year. Tom told the parable of the sheep and the goats. And in that, Jesus shows that those who are spiritually awake have a faith that overflows into blessing to the hungry, the thirsty, the stranger, the naked, the sick, and the prisoners. It's just what they do. And actually, they are not always aware that they're doing it. Because in that parable, they say to Jesus, but Jesus says, when you did these things, you did it to me. And they say, when did we do it? We didn't do this to you, Jesus. We did this to people. And he says, but when you do this for the least and the lost, you're doing it for me. When you're doing it for the least of my brothers, you're doing it for me. And that is why we are kind. That is why we show mercy, isn't it? Because we love Jesus. And when we're spiritually awake to him, it just overflows in what we do, wherever we are in our ordinary lives. We don't have to go off to Hong Kong to be with Jackie Pullinger. Some of us have. But we don't have to go abroad and do it there. We do it wherever we are in our vocation, in our everyday lives, when Jesus has awakened us to that. So that's what we want to see more of. We already see it in the church, and we want to see more of it. We believe Jesus is opening this up. So what if, imagine in 2023, if this became a year when you simply chose to show more kindness and mercy to your colleagues. And when I say colleagues, we talk in terms of vocation, wherever it is you spend most of your time, because some of us, our vocation is in the home. What if you simply chose to show more kindness to your colleagues, to those in your small group, to your neighbours, your literal and your virtual neighbours? What would that look like? Take a minute to think about that. What would it look like? What would it look like for you to show mercy and kindness to your colleagues? What would it look like for you to show more mercy and kindness to your small group? What would it look like for you to show more mercy and kindness to your neighbours? Sometimes our neighbours are our family members. Again, it doesn't need to feel onerous or complicated. Like I said, in the parable, the sheep who've lived for others and cared for others, they don't even know they've done it. Jesus is praising them and they're like, what? Did we do that? It's just part of an overflow because they're spiritually awake. Simple acts of love are used powerfully by Jesus. And one way we've seen love used in this church and want to continue seeing love used in this church is through food and meals and hospitality. It's not earth-shattering stuff. It's life stuff. It's what we do. At the crossover event we had over New Year, we had from the English school quite a large group of Iranians come and join us. Those of us from the church, they were new, we didn't know them. They were there with us. We had a meal, bring and share meal. And what I loved and what I saw, and this is the kingdom of God, there were tables where there were, not many of the Iranians spoke English. There were tables with people from this church and people from Iran, and they didn't speak the language together completely, but they were sharing a meal and trying, and the kingdom of God was displayed. Kindness, mercy, sharing a meal with somebody who doesn't speak your language or only speaks minimal, but the language that was spoken was one of love and kindness. And actually they stayed and they worshipped, and we were able to minister and pray, and God spoke. God spoke, and when he speaks, people understand, even if we don't have the words. And I'm going to talk about food again, because I think kindness and mercy, there's a lot to do with food. You just see Jesus constantly having meals with people, constantly having meals with his disciples. And we love that, and we believe spiritually awake people will do that. Taking food to people who are in crisis. A way of showing mercy and love to others is to take around meals or to organise food rotas. Let me tell you, when I had COVID last Christmas, I was really unwell. And there's something about COVID, like you have to kind of isolate because it's contagious. You isolate from other people in your household. You feel really low. I felt so low. There's some anxiety was around at the time. I felt like, what's going to happen? I'm not sure what this is. And also, I just felt really, really unwell. Lost my sense of smell and taste, and I was really tired. And Sherelle and Leon and Sherelle ordered pizza and had it delivered to our house. And for me, I couldn't really taste it, but my kids could. I just felt the love of God. I felt the love from them, but I knew they'd done it because they loved Jesus. They were showing me, they are spiritually awake, and they were showing me mercy and kindness. And I just felt the love of God in that pizza. You look at it on the outside, it's just food, but it was a time when I was feeling really low and really unwell, and my family were loved and cared for and nourished because of the kindness of my brothers and sisters. And that's what we want to see more of in 2023. The overflow of love and mercy to others can be simply messaging people or phoning people when you haven't seen them for a while. Can you imagine that? If we were a community where somebody hasn't come to church for a few weeks and they get a phone call or they get a message from someone saying, hey, I notice you're missing. I've missed you. Are you okay? How are you doing? And it doesn't have to come from the pastors or the leaders. It comes from the people. It comes from the people. That is the overflow of mercy. That is doing good to others. And we do it because of Jesus. What if we were a community that did that constantly asked Jesus, who do you want me to message? Who do you want me to phone? Who haven't we seen for a while? How can I reach out to them? And then the art of neighbouring. What if we were showing mercy and kindness to our literal neighbours, the people we live around? Whether we live in a flat, whether we live in a house, whether we live in a shed in the garden. Who lives around us that we can show goodness and kindness and mercy to? Now, someone who's really good at this is Maddie. I don't know if she's here, but Maddie is always showing mercy and kindness to her neighbours. And in fact, a couple of people here have come to church because she's brought them. And we want to be a church that does that. What if we do that? Michael and Alison Carpenter were telling me that this Christmas they've been doing a series with their small group on the art of neighbouring. Literal neighbours who live around you, getting to know their names, sharing your life with them. And they said this Christmas they had a party and they invited the people who live on their road. Right, it's simple. it's not massive, but it's totally of the kingdom. Showing mercy and kindness to those who live in the houses or the flats near us. What if we were a people like that this year? What if that was happening this year? And then what about if we were doing it? Oh no, and then my other story it's Maddie again, sorry. Oh no. And Maddie can tell that story in another week. And then finally, what if we were just doing it wherever we are? Matthew and Jolene, just before Christmas, turned up with a gift bag. They came to church with a gift bag, and I said, oh, what's that? And they said, this is for somebody we've met on the bus. Every week when we come to church, we see this lady. On the bus, we started talking to her, started telling her about Jesus, and this is a Christmas present we're giving to her on the bus. Mercy and kindness wherever we are. I'm going to stop there because Tom's looking at me because of time.
Amazing. So most of the awakening through mercy is through our everyday lives, what we do day in, day out in our homes and in our workplaces. As a church, we also have an organised kind of spearhead for our Awakening Through Mercy, which is our Vineyard English school. It's partly because of where God has placed us in Croydon, which is one of the front doors of the UK for the asylum-seeking process. So many people apply and register at Luna House in Croydon. And our Ministry of Mercy just began several years ago, literally just taking cups of drink to people stood in the queue. And from there, we quickly became aware that one of the best ways we could help people was to offer English classes. And so from one English class in a cold, borrowed back room of a church one morning a week, we're now up to 5 mornings a week online, Matthew's Yard, the Harvest Centre. We go from teaching people the basics, hello, my name is, all the way up to people who are looking for quite high-level jobs, and we're helping them with their English and their applications to get through it. And we're up to maybe 70-odd students most weeks. Even if we just keep going this year as normal, I fully expect that through the course of the year we'll be having 100 students week in, week out. We're pushing for more because the open secret about English school is we're not really teaching English. It's a ministry of welcome. It's a ministry of mercy. Lesley's already referenced the Iranians who came to our Christmas Eve service. You'd have heard some prayer in Farsi if you were there. And our New Year's Eve service. I just want you to think, and for some of you it'll be similar to your experience. But you've had to flee your country because of threat of violence, because of a newfound faith in Jesus. And you come over to this cold, concrete country, and there's a church that opens their door, and they just jabber away, and they try to make it work because they want to show the mercy of Jesus. It just makes all the difference to people, and we see people maybe more awake than we are, challenging us about where we're at faith-wise, and we see people in all kinds of need coming awake in Jesus because they've received mercy. And so we just want to keep going with that. Whether it's Karen going the extra mile on the phone, trying to get doctor's appointments for people whose first language isn't English, whether it's Alex pitching out on Christmas Eve with a car, or Josh willing to drive people from a hotel opposite Mayday Hospital to the service here, whether it's Liz raising up people into leadership of Bible studies whose first language isn't English, whether it's Jan and Dave. Not quite sure what Dave does, but Jan is absolutely amazing. And Dave's like the English gentleman. He shows it's amazing. It's a ministry of mercy, and that's part of what we want to do. I've got to keep going. Many awaken through us sharing content. Really what we're talking about is helping awaken others through invitation. Helping awaken others through invitation. And one of the things that happens when people begin to become awake, and you see this all throughout church history, is that the Bible begins to become very real for people. It goes from being the Bible to my Bible. Whether it's the Reformation, getting the Bible into ordinary people's hands, whether it's the Jesus Revolution, where loads of hippies just started reading the Sermon on the Mount and it changed the world. And so we've just been working hard with our New Testament journey. We're trying to get the Bible into you as easy as possible, and to make it as easy as possible for you to share it with others. This year we've worked pretty hard on our podcast. You can find that just 10 minutes a day. A link you can share, just getting the Bible into your ears, into our hearts, into our minds. A link that we can share, whether it's a paperback, which you can easily just buy for somebody. So often we can think, I've got to awaken others. Is that me, standing up on a bus and yelling at people who don't want to hear? Well, crazy stories can happen. But what it's going to mean 98% of the time is you sharing an invitation to somebody who's already open to you. It's going to be you sending a little link saying, I saw this and I thought of you. It's going to be you saying, hey, we've got a free lunch on Sunday, bring and share. Why don't you come along? It's going to be you saying, hey, my small group's going bowling. Would you want to join with us? It's going to be you saying, hey, I just heard this snippet of a talk and it stirred my heart and I thought you might benefit from it. It's awakening others through invitation. Finally, from me, thinking about the parable of the talents, Jesus having put in talents to this church. And you've probably noticed, if you've been around for a while, this church has an embarrassment of riches when it comes to music and worship. I'm not just talking about me. Did someone just snort over there? Tough crowd. But this is one of the ways that awakening happens, through music, through worship. So often in the scriptures, the music and the worship is on the front line. And so we've got our guy Zach, but really his job as Zach is to raise up others and to encourage others. And so we're going to put a lot of resource and time through Zach to raising up others, to continue this songwriting, to continue this capture of worship and music and new music. We're going to pull in some of our other expert guys. I'm looking around for them, people like Phil and Rich and Marcus, to share, to put this talent to work, to say to Croydon and beyond, there's a king in heaven. And for that sound to ring out and to wake people up. So you're going to be hearing more about that. But it's awakening. It's awakening people through music, through mercy, through invitation, through the word.
So I'm going to give a quick summary because we're running out of time. I've got loads more stories that I'd love to share, but we'll have to save those for another time. So we believe 2023 is going to be a year where we begin to contend individually and together for spiritual awakening in Croydon. We are ordinary believers, but we serve an extraordinary God. We do this partly on our own, but we also do it together as a community. And the Lord oversees it all through his power and through his love. And the three ways we're going to do this. In 2023, we want to see people awaken through a significant growth in prayer across this church as we individually are just finding ourselves praying more throughout our day, but also doing it together. In 2023, we want to see people awakened through us showing more simple mercy to others in the midst of our everyday lives. And in 2023, we want to see people awakened as we invite our networks into encounters with Jesus through sharing gospel content with them in many different ways. And I want to encourage you, if we do these simple things, God will do amazing things. Because we are just ordinary believers serving an extraordinary God. This has been, for Tom and I, this has been one of the great, planting this church and meeting you guys and being here in Croydon has been one of the greatest adventure of our lives. And you being part of this church, each one of you, means this is your adventure too. And we want to invite you to step into this as we go forward into this next year, using your own individual, unique abilities, skills, hearts, personalities, woven together with the others in the church. The Lord is in this. Let's contend for a spiritual awakening in 2023.